A-list starlet Chloe had a car accident, and my husband was the one who carried her into the hospital. Her uterus was severely injured, leaving her at risk of infertility or bleeding to death. She demanded that I be the one to operate on her, saying she'd rather die in agony otherwise. In my previous life, even though I knew she and my husband were having an affair, I upheld my professional duty as a doctor and took the surgery. The operation was a success, but afterward, she complained endlessly of abdominal pain and launched an online smear campaign accusing me of being unprofessional. It cost me my job, got me disowned by my family, and ultimately led me to slit my wrists in a bout of depression. Meanwhile, she walked over my dead body to be with my husband, out in the open. Reborn, I looked at the woman before me and pointed to another operating room where a different patient was waiting. This surgery is just as critical. You'll have to find someone else. Her procedure was extremely high risk. Now her only options were to transfer to another hospital, or stay here and wait to die. Doctor, please, you have to save her. She's so young, she can't lose her uterus. My husband, Mark, was frantic as he arrived at the hospital, carrying a blood-soaked Chloe in his arms. Anyone who didn't know better would have thought she was his wife. But Mark's wife is me. I'm the protege of this hospital's most renowned GYN surgeon, and a doctor here myself. My mentor retired last month, which means when it comes to gynecological surgery, I'm now the final authority here. Mark had picked me up from the hospital several times before, so my colleagues all recognized him. That's why, the moment they arrived, a colleague who couldn't stand the sight of it secretly sent a video of the scene to my phone. She added. The woman was clinging to his hand, calling him honey, and begging him to save her. You should probably brace yourself. Even though I'd already lived through this once, my eyes still welled up at my colleague's well-intentioned warning. In my past life, when Chloe falsely accused me of deliberately botching the surgery out of personal resentment, these same colleagues had stood up for me. But the wave of online trolls hired to attack me was too massive, and their supportive comments were quickly drowned out. Thank you for the heads up, I said quickly. My colleague glanced toward the emergency department and then rushed to say, oh no, it looks like they're transferring her to your department. If it's a GYN surgery, it might fall to you. They're getting on the elevator. You should probably make yourself scarce. She was worried I'd do something rash if I came face to face with that scumbag and his mistress, jeopardizing my upcoming promotion. I frowned because just then, the elevator doors opened. The patient being wheeled out was Chloe, and standing right beside her was my husband, Mark, looking completely distraught. The moment he looked up and saw me, he instinctively dropped his gaze. But Chloe, lying on the gurney, suddenly sat up. Ignoring the crowd of doctors and nurses rushing toward her, she looked past them all and pointed directly at me. I hear she's the top GYN surgeon's protege. I want her to perform my surgery personally. The news of Chloe's car accident was already all over the internet. Someone had filmed her being brought to our hospital by ambulance and posted it online. Now the whole world was watching this surgery. Our hospital's reputation was on the line. The vice president of the hospital, who had rushed to the scene, heard her demand and instinctively looked at me. Lily, since Ms. Chloe trusts you so much, why don't you handle this surgery personally? In my past life, I was on the verge of being promoted to attending physician. If it weren't for Chloe's online smear campaign, I would have had the title long ago. This same vice president played a significant role in my downfall. To ensure the promotion went to my department rival, Dr. Shaw, he deliberately deleted the surgical suite's security footage from that day, leaving me with no way to defend myself. He was pushing me to take the surgery now because he knew how risky it was. If I refused and Chloe wouldn't transfer, the procedure would fall to Dr. Shaw. But Dr. Shaw was careless and had already made several minor mistakes in the OR. He was afraid Dr. Shaw would screw it up and cause a major incident, so he wanted to toss this hot potato to me. Unfortunately for him, he miscalculated. I pointed to the adjacent operating room. I have a surgery at 10:30. The patient is being prepped for an emergency ectopic pregnancy. Her condition is extremely unstable. I can't perform 2 surgeries at once. You'll have to find someone else. I recommend a transfer. In my past life, because I was forced to take Chloe's surgery, that ectopic pregnancy patient collapsed in the clinic lobby. With no other choice, Dr. Shaw had to take the case. But the patient suffered a massive hemorrhage on the table and died. She was a 25-year-old girl, in the prime of her life. Her husband, who was reportedly in the military, rushed over only to find that she had already been taken to the morgue. I felt terrible about it in my past life. This time around, the first thing I did was run to the clinic lobby an hour ago, find her, and arrange for her immediate admission and surgery. I was confident I could save her, and I wanted to. Saving her was infinitely better than saving an ungrateful snake like Chloe. Hearing this, Chloe writhed on the gurney, shouting in pain and annoyance, "No! Get her another doctor. I want you, and I want you to operate on me now." She knew I was a skilled surgeon who could get her off the table safely. She didn't just want my husband, she wanted my skills too. And she was betting that I would never risk my career by sabotaging her surgery. All my years of hard work would have been for nothing. I scoffed. On what grounds? Your life is a life, but someone else's isn't? The ectopic pregnancy patient is already showing signs of major hemorrhaging. If you selfishly delay her surgery and something happens to her, can you live with that responsibility? Faced with an accusation like that, if Chloe had any sense, she'd know what to do. Transfer immediately, or have my husband use his money to fly in a team of specialists for an emergency procedure. Either would have been a viable option. But Chloe, banking on her youth, was determined to go head-to-head with me. Her surgery has nothing to do with me. You're just trying to get out of operating on me because your husband is in love with me. She blurted out the affair just like that. Gasps echoed around us. This starlet really had some nerve. Chloe didn't care. All she knew was that this was her chance to take me down and become the legitimate Mrs. Miller. Ignoring the looks of contempt and surprise from the people around us, she attacked again. Aren't doctors supposed to be impartial? Right now, I'm a patient first and foremost. You can't refuse me. If you do, you're showing a reckless disregard for human life. Is that how you use that phrase? Trying to guilt me into it? I almost laughed. I put on my mask and turned to leave. I have to prep for surgery. I don't have time for your games. You should transfer while you still can. Seeing that her guilt trip wasn't working, Chloe turned to Mark, who was wringing his hands, and put on a pitiful act. "Honey, it hurts so much. Please ask her for me. I only want her to do my surgery." The moment Mark's eyes met mine, he looked away, embarrassed and guilty. He never expected this to happen, not only running into me with his mistress, but having her demand that I be her surgeon. But then he thought about how I hadn't gotten pregnant in the 5 years we'd been married. A problem he blamed on me. Chloe had already promised to have his children. He couldn't just stand by and watch her lose her uterus, leaving the Miller family without an heir. Steeling himself, he looked at me, his eyes full of impatience. "Even if you're mad at me for cheating, there's a limit. Chloe is in this state. As a doctor, your first duty is to save lives. If you dare let her die, I'll divorce you." I laughed coldly to myself. This was the man I had loved for 5 years? At this critical moment, he was siding with Chloe, letting her torment me? But I wasn't afraid anymore. I could lose the house, the marriage. I didn't care. I'd already died once. Did he really think I'd let a man who betrayed me dictate my decisions? I didn't turn back. I just tossed a single sentence over my shoulder. "Then let's get a divorce. A bitch and a bastard. You two deserve each other." Mark probably never imagined that I, the wife who had always been so warm and considerate, would ever raise my voice to him. He felt as if his name, the name of the great Mark Miller, had just been dragged through the mud. As I walked further away, he knew he couldn't drag me away for a confrontation in the middle of a hospital during work hours. All he could do was roar in helpless rage. "Fine, divorce me. Don't you regret it?" I ignored him and walked into the sterilization room to begin my work. As the heavy steel door slowly closed behind me, shutting out the world, I felt a sense of peace. In that moment, nothing else mattered. I was just a doctor. The only thing in my mind was my patient, and how to get her safely off the operating table. That was all that was important now. Outside, in the hospital corridor, it was another story. Chloe was still throwing a fit. "I don't care. I want her to do my surgery. If she doesn't agree, I'll die in your hospital today. At first, Mark tried to reason with her. Honey, she's already started another surgery. It'll probably be hours before she's out, and you can't wait that long. Let me get you transferred. The public hospital about 3 miles from here is top-notch. They'll make sure you get through this safely. If Chloe hadn't insisted the ambulance bring her here after the accident, she would have been taken to the Level 1 trauma center closer to the crash site, not this high-end private hospital. The vice president was also afraid Chloe's stubbornness would lead to her death in his hospital. If that got out, the media firestorm would be a catastrophe. He had no choice but to join in. Yes, Ms. Chloe, perhaps you should transfer. Dr. Peters has already retired, and our other GYN specialist is on vacation. Other than Lily, the only doctor available to perform this surgery is Dr. Shaw, and she's quite junior. To be safe, I also recommend an immediate transfer. But Chloe wasn't listening. Her mind was fixated on her prize, becoming the next Mrs. Miller. She even asked the vice president, "How long until her surgery is over? I'm willing to wait." Seeing her determination, the vice president had her moved to an inpatient room for a full workup while someone called in to ask a nurse. The answer came back quickly. Could be an hour or two on the short end, but it could also take 7 or 8 hours. If Chloe had listened to reason then, she could have saved her uterus. But she was resolute. I'll wait for her. Schedule me as her next surgery and get me prepped. With that, a deathly pale Chloe, with the help of a nurse, began to get prepped and change into a hospital gown. The vice president and Mark were shooed out of the room. Fearing the worst, Mark called his secretary. Get me the most reputable specialists from every nearby hospital, who can be here immediately. Money is no object. Chloe overheard him from inside the room and started shouting, "No! I want Lily. Don't you dare call anyone else, or I'm breaking up with you." Mark had to back down. And so Chloe waited, her face ashen, an oxygen tube in her nose. She even found the energy to record a short video to interact with her fans. Until half an hour later, a large pool of blood suddenly gushed out from under her. By the time the surgery was over, 5 hours had passed. Looking at the bleeding that had finally been staunched, I handed the hemostat to my assistant, my forehead beaded with sweat. "The rest is up to you." I stepped away and leaned against the wall to rest, but my body immediately started to slide down. I'd been standing for too long, and the intense pressure had left me completely drained of strength. A nearby nurse quickly asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Wiping the sweat from my brow, I nodded. Just like in my previous life, the patient had started to hemorrhage halfway through the surgery. Fortunately, I was prepared this time and managed a brilliant save. I saved the patient's life, though I had to remove one of her fallopian tubes. She lost a lot of blood, but after a good recovery, she'd still have a chance of having children in the future. As I left the OR and entered the long corridor, all the other operating room doors were shut tight. For a second, I thought I heard Chloe's cries of pain. It was probably just a stress-induced hallucination. For a moment, I even felt like I was back in my previous life, right after I had finished Chloe's surgery. Back then, I hadn't held her affair with my husband against her. I just hoped that once she recovered, she would stay out of our lives for good. But she repaid my kindness with betrayal, destroying everything I had, all for a man. In my past life, when I took that scalpel and cut my own arteries, my hands were shaking. How hopeless I must have felt. The heavy steel door slowly opened in front of me. Mark, waiting outside, thought it was Chloe being wheeled out. He rushed toward me. "Doctor, how is Chloe?" When he looked up and saw my exhausted face, he was speechless. I frowned slightly. She didn't transfer? She let Dr. Shaw operate on her? I had specifically told Mark before that Dr. Shaw was an incompetent doctor who got her job through connections. Yet he still allowed her to operate on Chloe. It seemed he didn't love Chloe as much as I thought. He was practically gambling with her life. Mark clearly understood my implication. His face was etched with worry. I didn't want to, but we ran out of time. Her condition was critical. Chloe wasn't my patient anymore. Whether she was in critical condition or not had nothing to do with me. Exhausted as I was, I had no interest in discussing his mistress. I turned and walked toward my office. I was so hungry my vision was blurry, and all I wanted was to get some food and recharge. An idea struck me. I opened my phone's front-facing camera, started recording a video, and hid it on a nearby bookshelf, aimed at myself. I held up my slightly trembling hands to the camera. Just finished a 5-hour surgery. My hands barely feel like my own anymore. Then I expertly pulled a pack of crackers from my drawer and began to devour them, washing them down with a cup of cold water. My colleague at the next desk saw me and looked puzzled. "Are you recording a video or live streaming? You know streaming isn't allowed at the hospital." I put a finger to my lips with a knowing smile. "It's a video. You'll see what it's for in a bit." As I ate, I bent my head and started writing up my surgical notes. Suddenly, with a loud bang, Mark burst in without knocking. His eyes were bloodshot as he grabbed my arm. "Chloe's in grave danger. The hospital has approved you to join the surgery. You have to go save her." I knew it. I knew Chloe wouldn't let me off the hook that easily. Facing a crisis, and now they want me to join? The vice president was probably trying to make me take the fall for Dr. Shaw. Chloe would, of course, be happy to see it happen, but I wasn't about to let my career be destroyed a second time. I pointed to my trembling hands. "I'm afraid I can't help. I need at least an hour to recover. You should use your money and call in that team of outside experts." Mark's voice was hoarse. "The experts I called won't get here in time. She might not make it. If anything happens to her, I won't let you off the hook." I found this hilarious. I looked up at him coldly. "What does that have to do with me? I'm not her attending physician, nor was I involved in her treatment. The accident happened because you two were getting a little too frisky in the car, which distracted the driver and made him crash into the median. Otherwise, how could it have injured her uterus so precisely? What does any of that have to do with me? Did I tell you to get it on in a moving vehicle? Was I driving the car?" There was a closer, more reputable trauma center right near the crash site, but she insisted on coming all the way here to have her lover's wife perform the surgery. "Don't make your malicious intentions so obvious." Mark was stunned into silence. He knew it was all true. He just couldn't believe I knew everything, even what he and Chloe were doing in the car. After a long pause, he looked away guiltily. "Honey, you've misunderstood. I wasn't messing around with her in the car, and our relationship isn't what you think. Let's talk about this when we get home." With that, he scurried out of my office. My colleague, who had witnessed the entire exchange, gave me a thumbs up. "You're like a psychic." I gave a bitter smile. Once bitten, twice shy. I had only learned the disgusting details of Chloe's car accident in my past life after I died. My ghost had drifted back to our apartment, where I overheard Mark and Chloe arguing about it. After resting for exactly an hour, my second scheduled surgery of the day was ready. As I swiped my fingerprint and walked back into the surgical corridor, I happened to see Chloe being wheeled out of an adjacent or vomiting uncontrollably. Dr. Shaw was with her, along with a specialist who had arrived later. By the time the specialist got there, however, the surgery was already over, and he hadn't been able to assist. When Chloe saw me, her eyes were practically dripping venom. She opened her mouth to curse at me, but she was so weak from blood loss that she just dry heaved again, her face a terrifying shade of pale. When I finished my second surgery and returned to my office, Dr. Shaw was already there waiting for me. She gave me a triumphant smirk. "The surgery was a success. I bet you didn't see that coming. Miss Chloe has already promised to do more publicity for our hospital. I'm going to be the new face of this place. The attending physician spot is definitely mine." Her? An attending physician? In my past life, if the vice president and Chloe hadn't conspired against me, that title would have been mine. It looked like the two of them had teamed up again in this life. But I wasn't afraid. This time, I hadn't touched Chloe's surgery. Whether she did well or not had no bearing on me. Moreover, the ectopic pregnancy surgery I had just performed was a huge success. The patient's family was thrilled when they arrived and said they would be singing my praises. Now everyone on this floor was saying I had the best reputation, and my promotion was practically a done deal. At 6 p.m., when I finally took off my white coat and left the hospital, I felt an incredible sense of relief. The dreadful day was almost over. When I got home, Mark wasn't back yet. He was probably still at the hospital with his precious Chloe. In the corner, the roses celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary were still in their vase. It was a pathetic sight. I pulled them out and threw them straight into the trash. Then, through a friend, I contacted a divorce lawyer. After I explained the situation, he said he would draft the divorce papers as soon as possible. This divorce was happening. I wasn't just talking. Mark didn't get home until late that night. Exhausted, he walked into the master bedroom, intending to sweet-talk me and smooth things over. Instead, he found all my belongings packed up and stacked in a corner. I had moved into the guest room and even locked the door. "Honey, open the door. We need to talk," he said, knocking patiently. "You can talk to my lawyer tomorrow." After that, no matter how much he knocked, I ignored him. It was late, and I needed to sleep. I had a long day of work ahead of me. Now that I'd decided on a divorce, I wasn't going to dwell on the past, not on old feelings, not on his betrayal. Compared to death, these were minor issues. My future was bright. I hadn't been disowned, I wasn't depressed, and I felt confident and full of life. I slept soundly through the night. Mark, on the other hand, didn't sleep a wink. He worried about the truth of Chloe's accident leaking online and damaging his image as a businessman. He worried about whether Chloe's surgery would affect her fertility. And he worried that I was serious about the divorce and would take a huge chunk of his assets. In the morning, I finished my routine on the treadmill and sat down at the table to enjoy my breakfast. Mark finally got up. With dark circles under his eyes, he sat down across from me. He massaged his temples, his head aching as he looked at the packed boxes in the living room. "Are you really divorcing me? I was just angry yesterday." I smiled, looking at him like he was garbage. "Yes, we're getting a divorce. I've already had the papers drawn up. They'll be delivered to your office this morning. Sign them, and we can part ways amicably." Mark finally panicked. It wasn't that he couldn't bear to lose me. He wouldn't have cheated if he did. He was afraid I would take half of our marital assets. As long as we were married, I couldn't take that wealth with me. His tone softened, and he reached for my hand. "Honey, can't you just forgive me this once? As for Chloe, if she has a baby, I'll bring it home for you to raise. I won't marry her. You're my wife, my only wife. Why should I tolerate my husband having a baby with another woman? Was raising my husband's mistress's child supposed to be some kind of gift?" I was disgusted. I pulled my hand away and wiped it vigorously on a napkin. "No, thank you. You two can raise as many as you like. The movers will be here soon. Here are the keys to the house. The next time we see each other will be at the courthouse." I threw the keys onto the table, grabbed my purse and walked out, ignoring all his pleas to stay. I had already told my family, even the elders, about the divorce. After a brief family video call last night, where I threatened to cut them all off, they finally stopped trying to get me to reconcile with Mark and agreed to the divorce. A marriage is a union of two families, and a divorce is their separation. While the financial ties might not be severed completely right away, our family's future collaborations would be far less intimate. Once the elders were informed, there was no going back. Whether Mark liked it or not, this divorce was happening. Mark didn't put up much of a fight. He believed I was the reason we hadn't had children in 5 years, and since I was only asking for what I was legally entitled to, he gritted his teeth and agreed, eager to clear the way for his future children to inherit his wealth. The next morning, I took a day off, and we went to the courthouse. In 30 days, after the waiting period was over, we would be officially done. As we walked out of the courthouse, Mark sneered. "You're infertile. Without me, you're nothing." I laughed. "Without you, I'm Dr. Lee and I'm Ms. Lee. I have a great education and a strong background. I can do just fine on my own. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with my fertility." I looked at our premarital health screening results from 5 years ago. "You were too busy to look at them back then, but I kept them for you at the bottom of the safe. You should take a look when you have a chance." Mark froze. "What are you talking about? How could I possibly?" I didn't answer. I just hailed a cab and left. Between the two of us, I wasn't the one who was infertile. It was Mark, with his unhealthy lifestyle. He had a zoospermia, the incurable kind. I'd known since our premarital checkup 5 years ago, but I didn't want to hurt his pride, and I wasn't planning on having kids within 5 years anyway. So I never told him, figuring he'd eventually find the report himself. I never imagined it would become his excuse for cheating. The irony was suffocating. When I got back to the hospital, my colleagues were giving me strange looks. Had Chloe started another online campaign against me? Back in my office, I immediately asked my colleague Jen, "What's with all the looks?" Jen whispered, "For the past few days, Chloe's been trying to tear you down and build up Dr. Shaw by bragging to her fans on live streams about how amazing Dr. Shaw's skills are." Even though Chloe was having occasional abdominal pain, Dr. Shaw, as her attending physician, dismissed it as a normal post-op symptom. But today, Chloe started screaming in agony. A new scan showed the surgery was a failure. She has a severe infection, and they might have to remove her uterus. Dr. Shaw has already been suspended, and a medical malpractice investigation is about to begin. The vice president will probably be held responsible, too. And Chloe is once again demanding that you perform the next surgery, no matter how long she has to wait. So she wouldn't rest until she dragged me down with her. I hadn't wanted to make our personal business public, but since she kept coming after me, it was time to return the favor. During my lunch break, I called a friend who runs a media company and asked for a small favor. Half an hour later, a major paparazzi site dropped a bombshell. A list starlet Chloe caught in affair with married magnate. The video of Mark carrying Chloe into the hospital, the clip of Chloe demanding I operate on her, the recording of my argument with Mark in my office, photos of Mark and me at the courthouse, it was all there. They even included roadside surveillance footage from the day of the accident, showing the two of them crawling out of the car, disheveled. The evidence was so damning they had no way out. The internet exploded. Hordes of people flocked to the story for the drama. By the time Chloe and Mark tried to do damage control, it was already too late. Mark didn't have a social media presence, but Chloe did. Her account, with its 5 million followers, was instantly flooded with furious comments from netizens tearing her apart. Chloe is so toxic. Going to her lover's wife's hospital after the crash? Was she trying to rub it in her face? How dare she demand the wife perform her surgery? I see right through her little game. I actually felt sorry for her after the accident. Now I just feel sorry for myself for being such a bad judge of character. Chloe deserved that car crash. So much for her innocent flower persona. Doing that in a car. Cancel Chloe. We can't let people like her corrupt society. I feel so bad for the wife. She did nothing wrong and almost got her entire career destroyed. Seeing the tidal wave of hate directed at her online, and watching the stock price of Mark's family company plummet, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The moment Mark heard the news, he called me. I didn't answer, just rejected the call. If I didn't need to see him again to finalize the divorce, I would have blocked him on the spot. He resorted to texting me. "Honey, I know you did this. Take it out on me, but please leave her alone. She's been through enough." I texted back. "She started it. She's still trying to force me to do another surgery on her. Can't she live without trying to frame me?" Mark thought for a moment, then decided to change tactics. "Honey, if you agree to let her off the hook and issue a public clarification that those rumors are baseless, I'll give you an extra $10 million in the divorce settlement. How about it?" He was completely missing the point. "If I were you, I'd be issuing a public apology right now to minimize the damage to your company, not trying to shut me up." But Mark's pride wouldn't let him bow his head and admit he'd made a mistake. He texted again. "How about 20 million? If you deny the rumors about our marriage, it'll stabilize the company's stock, and Chloe can get through this." I replied instantly, "No deal. If you really care about Chloe, you'll convince her to transfer hospitals. Tell her to stop bothering me. If she can save her uterus, she can still have kids. It doesn't matter that you have azoospermia. She can use a sperm donor. The baby might not be yours, but at least the wife will be." I took a screenshot of the conversation and sent it to our family group chat, letting everyone see Mark's disgusting true colors. My mother-in-law was the first to react in the chat. "Azoospermia? How could my son have azoospermia?" Her world came crashing down. My parents cursed Mark, saying he got what he deserved, and then left the group chat. Since I was divorcing him, our families were no longer connected. One by one, all the relatives from my side of the family left the group. Mark's aunts and uncles, however, all jumped in, offering their 2 cents. One offered to have her grandson be adopted by Mark, clearly eyeing his fortune. Another offered to introduce him to a young woman who could be a surrogate, just adding fuel to the fire. Someone else advised him not to get divorced and to work things out with me. Since you can't have kids anyway, why make so much trouble? Their meddling mouths drove Mark half crazy. I watched the drama unfold with growing satisfaction. Once I'd had my fill, I left the group chat. The world was suddenly quiet. That afternoon, Mark sent someone to handle Chloe's transfer to another hospital. He was probably afraid she'd provoke me again and cause an even bigger scandal. I had less contact with Mark after that, but I'd always been on good terms with his cousin. She later filled me in on all the behind-the-scenes drama. Because of the azoospermia revelation and the hit to the company's stock price, Mark's father removed him as the family heir. He was demoted to manage a branch office in some backwater town, and his family cut off his high-limit credit cards. From now on, he'd have to live on a fixed salary. After being blacklisted from the entertainment industry, Chloe faced massive lawsuits for breach of contract. Once Mark's money dried up, she couldn't even afford her medical bills. Not long after, the infection became so severe that she was forced to have her uterus removed at a small local hospital, ending her chances of ever having children. You'd think two people who couldn't have children would find solace in each other. But instead, Mark started to resent Chloe for not even having a uterus and fought with her constantly. Chloe couldn't take it anymore. One night, she ended her debt-ridden life by jumping off a building. She died on the exact day our divorce waiting period ended. Mark never showed up at the courthouse, even though I waited for him all day. I knew he hated me. He wanted to trap me in the marriage. Since his life was miserable, he didn't want me to be happy either. He wanted to drag me down so I could never remarry. But I had no intention of ever getting married again. I'd been promoted to attending physician. I had money and looks. Why would I ever want to step back into the prison of marriage? If he wanted to drag it out, let him. I could file for divorce based on separation. It would just take a couple more years. During those 2 years, I went abroad, used a sperm donor, and successfully became pregnant. I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. When Mark found out I had a daughter, he finally relented on the divorce. He knew his resistance couldn't change anything anymore. It would only result in his own records showing a child with father unknown. The day we went to the courthouse to finalize the paperwork, Mark looked much older. When he held the divorce certificate, he expressed his first ever regret. I regret it. If only I hadn't cheated. I laughed coldly. If I were the one who had died and Chloe had won, would you still regret it? You don't regret your choices. You only regret that you lost. I didn't need his regret. All I needed was for him to live the rest of his life in misery, with no hope for the future, and eventually wither away,